Hi, my name is Parma Chai, class of 2006, course 9 and course 15 at MIT. I have worked at the Department of Youth Services, Greenpeace, as well as AmeriCorps as a political activist and a teacher. I am honored to speak to the world's foremost intellectual, Noam Chomsky, in this interview about issues of world democracy. Professor Chomsky, what do you think about the circus element of today's politics?
If you look at the sociological spectrum of the people who don't vote in the United States, it's roughly the same as the people in Europe who vote for one of the social democratic or labor-right policy parties. We don't have them here. We only have business parties. Tom Ferguson, a fine political scientist, just did an analysis of the 2014 election. It turns out to be pretty much like about 1830, at a time when voting was restricted to propertied white males. The actual voting county by county looks very much like that. So where does the clownishness come from? The kind of Trump phenomenon appeals to people like this.
Absolutely.
Somebody's finally saying something. Down with everyone. We hate everyone. So this guy's going to get rid of all of them. Okay? And he does it like a clown.
Yep.
And might well win the election.
What do you think that 2016 foretells for world democracy?
30 years of what are called neoliberal policies. It's basically an assault on populations of the world. The impact is pretty much the same everywhere. Stagnation or decline for a large part of the population, a concentration of wealth in very few hands, undermining of democratic participation, a lack of responsiveness of governments to populations. There are two possible reactions to this. One would be to organize and struggle and overcome it. The other is to be depressed and angry and in fact die. So one of the striking, quite startling recent discoveries, which you probably saw, was that in middle age, roughly 45, 55, less educated white males, that sector of the population mortality is actually increasing. That never happens in a developed society. Always goes down. And it's a result, the analysts say, of depression, drinking, hopelessness. And there's a huge campaign to get people to blame this on even more vulnerable people. So you blame it on immigrants, or on welfare mothers, or on cheats, but not on the people who are carrying it out. It's happening here, it's happening in England, it's happening in Europe, and it's a part of the reason for the lack of significant response is that this period has been correlated with a massive attack on the kinds of organizations in which the general population can get together to form policies, even to form opinions, which you just don't do by yourself when you're sitting alone watching television. So, for example, in Europe, where the same phenomena are very visible, a lot of the problem traces back to the undermining of popular democracy by concentrating decisions in the Brussels bureaucracy. The EU, they have the northern banks looking over their shoulders. That's their main constituency, and you can see it's led to an almost visceral fear of democracy. So, for example, when in Greece there was a suggestion that maybe the people should be asked what they want, but their own choices about their fate, it led to an utterly savage reaction across the spectrum.
Right.
Here it takes other forms. Main form here is that the population is just unrepresented. A large majority of the population, their representatives don't pay any attention to their opinions.
Yeah.
Their constituency is the rich donors. It shows up in abstention, which is very high, and it's class correlated. It's roughly the parts of the population that are unrepresented anyway. the commodity culture is driving people to evaluate their worth and their lives by the number of commodities they have. And of course there's a huge amount of propaganda. It's not just the kind of stuff we talked about in manufacturing consent. The main propaganda, which we didn't discuss much, is the public relations industry, the advertising industry.
Absolutely.
Hundreds of millions of dollars just to try to turn people into mindless, confused, irrational consumers.
You have said that the illusion of democracy has remained profitable due to a propaganda machine that manufactures consent. With Bernie Sanders, Ron Paul, and Elizabeth Warren or other figures now sharing information on network television that compromises the propaganda machine, do you think this will render the illusion of freedom unprofitable?
It's up to us. People can react to these circumstances in different ways, as I mentioned. We go back to, say, Weimar Germany. What happened is the center was collapsing. The main political establishment was collapsing. There was ferment on the moderate left, the labor movement, the socialist, communist parties. There was ferment on the right, which became the Nazis. It could have gone either way. In 1928, the Nazis had about 3% of the vote. In 1932, they had about a third.
Unbelievable.
Take over the country, we know what happened. So take, say, Belgium, a rich country, which is now groaning under the threat of refugees. The richest country in Africa, which could have led the way to rich, extensive development in Africa, is Congo. They had at the time of liberation, 1960, they had a very effective young leader, the most promising young nationalist leader in Africa, Patrice Lumumba. So what did they do with him? Well, the Belgians murdered him. They managed to get to him before the CIA, which was under orders to murder him. He was murdered. His body was cut to pieces and dissolved in sulfuric acid. But we're not like ISIS, you know.
No.
And what happened then is the United States and Belgium and others supported a miserable, brutal, murderous kleptomaniac who destroyed the country. Now it's the area where the worst atrocities in the world are going on in eastern Congo. And partly it's so that you can get minerals for your cell phone. The multinationals are all over the place. So if people are, and that's all over the region. If people are fleeing, why are they fleeing to Europe? Why not the other direction?
Interesting.
Or take Central America.
Right.
Why are people fleeing from Central America? And they're fleeing from the destruction caused by virtually genocidal attacks in Guatemala and destruction in El Salvador. One of the main sources of refugees now is Honduras, which was always very poor. It was turned into a real torture chamber after the military coup a couple of years ago, which was legitimized by Obama, by nobody else. So yeah, people are fleeing, so we drive them back, and we coerce Mexico into keeping them away from our borders, just as Europe is trying to buy off Turkey and keep them away from our borders. So we generate the refugees. We wail when a small number of them come here, and we ask the poor countries to accept the results of largely our atrocities. I mean, the bombing of Libya alone, first of all, it destroyed Libya. It undermined what could have been a peaceful settlement. The African Union had pretty reasonable proposals for settlement, which Gaddafi agreed. The imperial powers, the US, Britain, and France, disregarded it, decided to bomb, ended up destroying Libya. It's in the hands of warring militias, but also setting off a flood of weapons and jihadis all over Africa, well into the Middle East. The worst terrorist atrocities in the world are in West Africa now. Arms and jihadis, mainly from Libya. It's also opened a funnel for people to flow into Europe from the countries that have been devastated by European assaults for hundreds of years. That doesn't matter to us. All we want to do is keep them away from us, because we want to be rich
Right.
and quiet, live our happy lives in peace.
It was a pleasure to speak to Noam Chomsky in this interview, filmed by Steve McMorris and Warren Lynch. It is with great enthusiasm that I left Noam Chomsky's office, who applauded me for doing something good with my MIT degree. Please check out my other videos at www.parmachai.com. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much.
Push the arc of history in the right direction.
Thank you so much for saying that. You just totally made me cry.
Present for you.
Because you said just keep doing the radical work.
That's right. Crying happens in this office.
My
Sometimes
whole
it's me.